I want to say we welcome representative from the United Global Compact, representative from UN African Borderline Center, the UNDP, the corporate organizations that are here, the emeritus professors from Obafemi Awolowo University, the National Association of Geography Students. Okay, the National Association of Geography Students, both the undergraduates and the postgraduates. Then we have Professor Labode, the former Vice Chancellor of Osun State University, is also present on this call. So you are highly welcome, sir. So before we continue, I would like Dr. Agatha. Dr. Agatha.
Yeah, good morning.
Yeah, to take us through a brief profile of Professor Okogbe. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. A brief profile of our speaker today, the facilitator of this webinar. Professor Emmanuel C. Okogbe obtained his PhD degree in atmospheric physics and physics meteorological option from Obafemi Awolowo University in 2007. He won the very competitive Academic Staff Research Fellowship Award by the Commonwealth Scholarship Commission in the UK and spent the fellowship at the Department of Physics, Imperial College of Science, Technology and Medicine of the University of London from 1st October 2009 to 31st March 2010. He has traveled wide in search of scientific solutions to the many climate change and extreme weather-related problems confronting the world today in the areas of energy, agriculture, and sustainable environment. He himself was acting head of Department of Meteorology, Federal University of Technology, Akure, at various times between 2009 to 2017. He was also the substantive head of Department of Meteorology and Climate Science, Federal University of Technology, Akure, from 1st August 2017 to 30th April 2018. Under his leadership as head of the Department of Meteorology and Climate Change and Climate Science, the department won a CGRF-sponsored multi-million pound Africa Swift Joint Research Award, a 4-year research program with the University of Leeds and the Met Office, London in the UK, in collaboration with several other African universities and meteorological agencies. His research group in FUTA also won a multidisciplinary TED Fund sponsored research fund with him as principal investigator on flood early warning system and flood resilient mitigation and adaptive strategy under changing climate. He has published over 50 peer-reviewed articles in highly reputable journals and technical conferences. Professor Okogbe is an erudite scholar, an accomplished researcher, a mentor to many young and upcoming scientists. It is with great pleasure this morning that I welcome and introduce to you our facilitator today, Professor E.C. Okogbe. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here and to deliver this the first in the series of our webinars on issues that has to do with the environment. I'll be sharing a slide now, and we'll kick off from there. Yeah, I don't know if you can see my slide. Let me know. Nika,
yes, we can.
Yes, we can see it. Yes,
okay, so we're having this first series on climate change mitigation, understanding and reducing citizens and maybe families in the corporate organizations and like carbon footprint in Africa, like has been said at the introduction of this series. So, sorry, let me put this. Yep. So we kick off now. My God. All right. Now we have this presentation outline. I want to look at what is global warming and climate change, the science of it, mitigation and adaptation, and financing that these issues that people and the global communities are concerned with in the climate change discourse. Look at national, regional, and global outlook, the problem, how serious it is. Then the conference of parties, the engagement for solutions, we'll just make a brief introduction of that. Then key concerns of the global community when we gather or when they gather at this conference of parties, the COPs. Then tackling this, especially the mitigation, which we are concentrating on today, thinking globally and acting locally, we'll look at that. Understanding carbon footprint and how to reduce individuals, family, companies, carbon footprint, and the roles, various levels of people in human activity, will play in this. Now we'll start with the science. Burning fossil fuels generate greenhouse gas emissions that act like a blanket wrapped around the earth, trapping the sun's heat and raising temperatures in a process described as global warming. If you look at the picture on the left or the right panel, you have, okay, let me see if I can use a pointer. Okay, if you can see my cursor here, you see this is the Earth, blue and green. You see this envelope that encircles it, that wraps it, that is the atmosphere. And within this atmosphere, we have the greenhouse gases that we emit through human activities. I will tell us how that come about. And then you can see that these greenhouse gases are transparent or allow the radiation from the sun to pass through it, heats up the earth, and the earth, acting as a black body, like we say in science, emits its own radiation. The earth, the clouds, the atmosphere emits its own radiations, but these radiations are trapped because they are not transparent. The atmosphere is opaque to them. They are not transparent as to pass through. So now you keep having a circulation of the heat that is generated within the earth, not finding a way to escape. And so on a global average, the earth is heated up. To illustrate this concept of greenhouse effect, consider that you parked your car under a hot sun. After some hours under the hot sun, when you open the door of the car, what greets you is a stream of very hot air. What has happened is that the sun penetrated through the glass of your car windscreen and the glasses of the car windows or so, and heats up the interior of the car. The glass, we say, is transparent to the type of radiation from the sun, like I've said concerning the atmosphere. So which generates another kind of radiation within the car, which is what we refer to as a long-wave radiation. This radiation regime is not able to leave your car through the glass windows through which the shortwave radiation came in. So the car heats up. So that's what happens in the atmosphere. So the glasses of your car windscreen and door windows do not allow the long wave radiation to pass through to escape. That is, the glasses are opaque to long wave radiation. And so the internal temperature of the car continues to accumulate from the heating and warming up that the interior has generated until when you come to open the door, you now realize that, oh, the car is not as cool as when you left it. So this illustration explains the greenhouse effect of the greenhouse gases, preventing heat from escaping the Earth, causing rise in Earth's temperature. So on a global average, we say the Earth is warming in the concept we refer to as global warming. Now, examples of greenhouse gas emissions that cause global warming and consequently climate change include carbon dioxide, methane. These are the principal ones. The other ones are nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbon, and perfluorocarbons, and sulfur hexafluoride. These are also implicated, but not in a large sense. Now, these gases are emitted from our everyday activities that involve the use of gasoline as an energy for driving a car or coal for heating a building, for example. And other, other of our activities that we'll come to talk about as we go on that emit these greenhouse gases. The past 8 years has been recognized as the warmest in history. The one who introduced me mentioned the fact that I was in Imperial College in 2009. When I got there, some of the professors I want to work, in fact, the professor I went to work with was a member of the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. He asked me, Emmanuel, why did you choose to come to the UK when we have the worst winter? Can I tell us that since that time till now, every year, we experience, or the people in the higher latitudes experience the worst winter, so it's not only in 2009. So climate change refers to the long-term shifts in temperatures and by implication, other weather patterns. These shifts may be natural, such as through variations in the solar cycle and volcanic eruption. Up to now, there are still some skeptics who think, oh, sorry, the world is not warming. Actually, the world is cooling. But we tell them that there's nothing like climate change, but we tell them the evidence is there. Of course, you know that former president of the United States was reluctant in conceding to the fact that there's global climate warming until when we start having devastating hurricanes even in the state of Florida. So since the 1800s, human activities have been implicated as the main driver of climate change, primarily due to burning fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. And if you see the left panel here, you will see that, yes, those who say that they have been cooling, if you look at the blue, the plot here, the blue spot except for the little spike you have here that is red, that is showing that the climate is warming. But from about the period of the Industrial Revolution, this trend continued to be on the rise. So there's no doubt that the Earth is warming. This is those major gases or chemicals that contribute to climate change, their trend, or global warming and by implication climate change. You can see the first one here is carbon dioxide. You can see from about 1800, it started increasing, and the same with methane, the same with the nitrogen oxide. And this increment coincides with the industrialization of the world at that time. And since then, industrialization has been taking place and the increase is ongoing and it's not good for the Earth. Temperature rises must slow down, we're told, if we want to avoid the worst consequences of climate change. global warming needs to be kept to about 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2100. This was one of the resolutions of the advice of the IPCC to the world, and which was adopted, in one of the COP meetings at what we call the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement, so that we must keep global temperatures down to about 1.5, and at the worst, 2 degrees Celsius. It must not warm more than that. And unless further action is taken, the planet could still warm by more than 2 degrees Celsius. That warning is already there. A 2021 report by the Independent Climate Action Tracker Group circulated that the world was heading for 2.4 degrees Celsius of warming by the end of the century, if we continue doing business as usual. So climate change, therefore, calls for change in the way we do things. And one of my friends, actually my best man, one day we were talking about this issue of climate change. He said it's a global warming. He says it's global warning, not warming. That what we are seeing is a warning that, look, if you don't change the way you're doing things, we are in for real trouble. Now, what are the issues? Mitigation, adaptation, and the finance. Mitigation deals with, addresses the cause of climate change, or the cause of global warming and the climate change. So reducing emission is a concern of mitigation actions. Emission reduction targets and how these will be achieved in nationally determined contributions and indices is a key concern of the global community in the COP meetings. Now, the other one is adaptation, adjusting to current and future climate change impacts, and building resilience is a concern of adaptation actions. And of course, what is the finance for achieving this? Both the mitigation and adaptation, both are very costly. So how do you tackle the finance in a global arrangement? And so these are the key issues that, let's talk a little about this Conference of Parties. The Conference of Parties, or the COPs, bring together the governments which have signed the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Kyoto Protocol, and the Paris Agreement. So world leaders, ministers, and the negotiators come together to agree how to jointly address the issue of climate change and its impacts. Under the Paris Agreement, all countries agreed to keep the rise in global average temperatures to well below 2 degrees Celsius, and ideally 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels. Also, agreed to strengthen the ability to adapt to climate change and build resilience. Align finance flows with a pathway towards how greenhouse gas emissions and climate change resilience development could be tackled. African countries have outlined bold aspirations to build climate resilient and low carbon economies in their nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement. Now, let me repeat again that the key concerns of the global community are these three, which I've mentioned earlier. So there are the three major concerns the global community always discuss in Conference of the Parties, the COPs. Now, the latest was COP27 held in Egypt, which were popularly called the African COP. Having signed and ratified the Paris Agreement, nearly all African countries have committed to enhancing climate action through reducing their greenhouse gas emissions and building resilience. For the continent, adaptation to the adverse impacts of climate change is urgent. COP27, commonly referred to as the African COP, allowed African countries to spotlight its special needs, circumstances, and opportunities to the global community. African nations used the opportunity of COP27 in Egypt to state common resolve to mobilize internal and external resources to tackle climate change. The event provided African countries, also the development partners, including the African Development Bank, the opportunity to highlight measures to tap the continent's unique economic potential. So the African Union chairperson remarked during the conference, work is ongoing across the continent. Many governments have rolled out initiatives to address climate change impacts and build resilience, but the challenge are huge and the time is not on our side. Now, if you look at what you have on the right, and the key that is there, the annual emissions by country, you will notice that African continent is hardly in the red, except for Southern Africa, because it's hardly in the red. But Africa is the most exposed region to the adverse effects of climate change, despite contributing the least to global warming, as can be seen on that map. The region is already disproportionately feeling the impacts related to a changing climate. Some of these have been mentioned in the introduction. Devastating cyclones affect 3 million people in Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe in the spring of 2018. Floods resulting from extreme precipitation in over 34 out of the 36 states of Nigeria this year, displacing over 1.3 million people, including the country home of the former president of Nigeria, and claiming over 600 lives and properties worth millions of naira. Droughts and heat waves are not left out. And also the GDP exposure of African nations is vulnerable to the issues of extreme climate. And so it's been projected to the GDP will grow from $895 billion in 2018 to about 1.4 trillion in 2023, nearly half of the continent's GDP. And this GDP is exposed to, is vulnerable to climate change. We can see it here, the impact of climate change on sub-Saharan Africa. Now you have three scenarios. The first is a zero warming, which is not possible. And the other one is keeping the to the Paris Agreement of keeping temperatures to about 1.5 degrees Celsius. And if at worst we go to 2 degrees Celsius, we also have the impact on the Africa GDP. And finally, if we now continue business as usual and the temperatures skyrockets, you can see the GDP is the worst for it. Here you have the production-based carbon dioxide emissions in Africa in 2021 by the metric tons of carbon. You have South Africa leading, followed by Egypt, followed by Nigeria, and so on like that. So South Africa was the most polluting country in Africa in 2021. That year, it emitted nearly 36 million metric tons of carbon dioxide. Egypt ranked second, emitting 250 million metric tons, and so on. Nigeria also came, and Egypt and Libya and all that. Now, looking a little coming home, the situation in Nigeria. Annual and seasonal timescales indicate a significant positive increase in temperatures in Nigeria. Mean temperatures have been consistently increasing throughout the country in the last 5 decades and have been rising significantly since the 1980s, with a change of 1.01 degrees Celsius between the range of 0.52 to that in the linear warming of the period 1951 to that to 2005. The linear warming for the same period for 30-year averages on a decadal slice further revealed positive changes in temperature by an average of 0.2 degrees Celsius per decade. The source is the National Climate Change Policy Document for Nigeria for 2021 to 2030. Note, please, the increasing temperatures in Nigeria and other African countries is not equivalent to emissions from the country oil. It is grossly in excess of the emission because the atmosphere because the atmosphere has no boundaries, so we suffer what we suffer. When I say the atmosphere has no boundaries, I normally use, when I was in 100 level in the university, with the room I was given, we have what we call commonwealth. The commonwealth in the sense that the rooms are not sealed, are not walled to the end, so it is partitioned with plywood, so that my room and the next neighbor will kind of share common atmosphere. If I'm cooking in my room, if I was cooking in my room, you will be perceiving the odor in your room. The other person will be perceiving, that's what happened in the global community, because we say the atmosphere has no boundaries. What happens in China? What happens in the United States of America? What happens in Egypt, for instance, in Africa, that is in South Africa, sorry, that is the greatest polluter, is shared by all countries. So that brings us to the balance in climate change discussions, that we think globally and act locally. We think globally because we are affected by what happens by other countries. We act locally because no country is coming in the real sense of it to solve our problem. And that is going to, now, this slide shows us the total greenhouse gas natural emissions for the year 2015. So we can see from agriculture, forestry, and other land uses, energy, industrial processes, and product use, and waste. We have those distributed percentages of the emission. Okay. Now, tackling this problem, especially the mitigation, how do you reduce the cost of climate change? Now, thinking globally, the most fundamental principle upon which multilateral climate action is taking, discussion is taking place, is the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. This principle reflects the historical responsibility of today's developed countries for the largest share of historical and even current emissions of greenhouse gases. So under this principle, these developed countries have the legal obligation under the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement to take the lead in combating climate change and its adverse effects.
That's
This is
Professor of Climate Change, Clinical Political Science, Logical Science, Climate.
This includes reducing the emission and providing developing countries with the means to undertake their own mitigation actions. This is what is discussed, that because you develop countries, okay, let's talk about the other thing, the equity and fair share. And that's where some groups like the NGOs should add the voice in demanding for climate justice. Demanding for climate justice has to do with that from colonial era to the present time, the developed nations have exploited the world, have industrialized using coal, gas, and all that. And don't forget that these greenhouse gases have their resident time in the atmosphere. The reason is this: even if we stop polluting today, it will not solve the problem of climate change. Assuming we have zero carbon emissions today, there is enough carbon already in the atmosphere to give us trouble. So where did we get this carbon from? From the industrial era, when we did not participate in the industrialization. Those who participated and exploited us, now have a duty not only to reduce their emissions, but also to help adaptation and think of how they adapt to the climate change, but also to help us, whom they have impoverished, whom they have exploited, in doing our own. That is where the climate financing comes in, seeking for justice. So in thinking globally, it means we must participate in demanding for climate justice. And that is why our active participation in the COP meetings is crucial to the survival of Africa. Now come to talk acting locally. Now recall the evidence that climate is changing. We have already devastating cyclones, floods, and then floods and all the other things. All these affect us also, and more, like I say, because we have not built resilience, because to build resilience and capacity to adapt is costly, very costly. And that's why we keep on dabbling with the problems. Who will think that the former president of Nigeria will be using boats to be assessing his country home, where it have been the beehive of political activities. Now, in acting locally, therefore, we ask ourselves, what can we do at various levels of human activities to mitigate the causes of climate change? We'll be asking the same questions when talking about adaptation and building resilience, which is going to be for another webinar. That brings us to the issue of understanding the concept of carbon footprint, how we can calculate our carbon footprint and what we can do to reduce it to the barest minimum at the various levels of human activity. We can't stop it, but we can reduce it. What is carbon footprint? A carbon footprint is the total amount of greenhouse gases, mainly carbon dioxide and methane, produced directly and indirectly by our activities as individuals, families, companies, industries, which culminates into the natural emission expressed in equivalent tons of carbon dioxide. Every person, organization, product, event has a carbon footprint. Typically, a person's carbon footprint is represented as the sum total of all their direct and indirect carbon emissions over the course of a year. The smaller your carbon footprint, the better for the planet, the future. It means that your activities release more greenhouse gases and had a bigger negative impact on the environment. What does this mean? As humans, we indulge in a lot of activities, from cooking to driving, attending parties, engaging in various businesses, and in a bid to live a good life. We seem to forget that as we do all this, we directly or indirectly emit carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. The smaller your carbon footprint, the better for the planet and the future. The total amount of greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide and methane, that are generated by our actions constitute this. The average carbon footprint for a person in the United States is about 16 tons, one of the highest rates in the world. Globally, the average carbon footprint is closer to 4 tons per person. Areas we can check and reduce our carbon footprint: transportation, and business. So these are areas we must check. Homes and business contribute about 18% of the country's total greenhouse gases in some countries that we have done the study. Of this home energy, our heating and cooling systems are the worst offenders, causing almost 80% of all carbon emissions from residential and commercial house sources. The global level, at the global level, 70% of greenhouse gas emissions are related to household consumption. That will interest you. 10% to government consumption, 18% to investments. Food accounts for 20% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So operation and maintenance of residence is 19%, and mobility, 17%, that's transport. So both as industry and the home, we must be, and in the family, we must be careful. Now, one important thing is your hidden carbon footprint. When we think about greenhouse gases, it's easy to, just think about the obvious things: vehicle emissions, industrial smokestacks, belching black smoke into the air, industrial chimneys, and other things we can clearly see and smell, causing pollution. However, it's important to stay aware of the hidden sources of carbon emissions. And that's one of the importance of this webinar. All the consumer goods we buy have their own carbon footprint, and that cost can be surprisingly high. Do we bother when we want to buy things to check? Do they even, those that, whether the agencies of government that regulate products and things like that, do they care? If you go to Europe or America, you buy something, you have to look at it. The labels are there. From production to the time you're buying it, how much carbon is emitted. You can take a decision. Sorry, I won't be party to helping these people to pollute the atmosphere. So starting with the extraction of raw materials, continuing through processing, transport, retail, storage, consumer use, and finally disposal, every step of the lifespan of consumer products adds a little to its carbon footprint. And this is hidden. How to calculate your carbon footprint? Now, to calculate your carbon footprint, we have to investigate and add the amount of carbon that is emitted by the activities we indulge in over a period of time. While teaching a course on this with my students, we took an example that students can relate with or relate to. Now, if you have this fuel, the unit that you consume, and the equivalent emission in carbon dioxide. Gasoline, sorry, petrol, 1 liter, your burn will be 2.3 kg. Gasoline, 2.3 kg. Diesel, and so on and so forth. So now let's assume that the journey from point A to point B maybe is 40 kilometers, and that a shuttle will consume 2 liters, of diesel or petrol for that drive. The carbon footprint for that, if it is diesel, is 2 liters times 2.7 kg, which will be equal to 5.4 kg of carbon dioxide. That's what you will emit when you decide to drive. Now let's make this more personal. We took an example in class of habitually 2 people, Ali and Simbi. Ali cooks with stove. Ali runs a generator for 5 hours per day, consuming 5 liters of fuel. Enters shuttle to Afro, those places. Likes eating chicken and chips, likes smoking. Simbi, on the other hand, cooks plant-based diets with a hot plate, has a solar and inverter system, has a bicycle she rides, prefers eating vegetables and fruit, and doesn't smoke. So what are the implications for both of them? For Ali, cooking, he will, be sending 2.48 kg of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere by cooking. Runs a generator for 5 hours, it will be sending 11.5 kg of carbon dioxide. Enter shuttle to Afro, it will be sending 5.4 kg of carbon dioxide and so on. And they likes eating chicken, and let's assume chicken, those who prepare use 1 liter of oil to fry, and that's what it is. On the other hand, for Ali, who Ali also likes smoking, and so smoking, he will get that. And if we compute the total carbon footprint for a day for Ali is 29.38 something kg of carbon dioxide, and then metric tons of carbon per day. This means that in a year, if you multiply by 365, this is what he'll be generating. Okay. Now we go to Simbi, who generates less, and we see that in his own case, he doesn't indulge in so much. He's more greener. Let's just put it that. And what does he generate? Just 0.46 metric tons per year. This is less than the global average of 4 tons, and the target we need to meet to avoid global warming, which is 2 tons per individual's carbon footprint. So if everyone is like Simbi, we will be able to save the earth. Still on acting locally, the question is, what can we do at the level of citizens, individuals and family levels, companies, politicians, government agencies, ministries, and NGOs to be climate smart and reduce our carbon footprint? Bear this in mind. On the global level, 72% of greenhouse gas emissions are related to household consumption. I've told us that earlier. 10% government consumption, 18%. So these are things we are trying to see whether you can, by your actions, reduce at various levels. Now, one of the things we can do is sustainable transportation. Sustainable transportation refers to low and maybe near zero or zero emission. That could be zero emission. Energy efficient, affordable needs, modes of transport and alternative fuel vehicles and other things like that. The benefits of sustainable transportation is, in many countries, could be cost savings and fuel vehicles and all the things that are there for time. I will not want to really spend much time on this. Enhance energy security, ensuring the use of fuel-efficient vehicles, and so on. Now we can decide to travel smart. Now, one of the pictures I've decided to show here, you can see Joka. Those are from Ondo State. We realized that a time there was when Mimiko, as governor of Ondo State, decided to put in major cities mass transit for students. That means that instead of every parent dropping his child in his car, the child will follow this mass transit. That has a lot of implications on reduction of carbon. Petrol cars, taxis tend to emit a lot of carbon dioxide. So that was a way of reducing it. The other way of traveling smart, you can see the lady that is enjoying his bike. And then the buses underneath, you can have those ones in Lagos and other countries. So public transport such as trains, buses, and coaches carry many people and are often more sustainable forms of travel because the greenhouse emission that is distributed or split between many people. Now, how to achieve a shift from private vehicles to public transport, walking, and cycling. Now I will summarize what is there. What advocates here for government agencies and others is to make our environment, our roads, to be friendly. I can, even from my house, I can do a lot of walking because the road is not good. Whereas in other climes, the road network is good. You can cycle safely. You can walk safely. And of course, small journeys, you have pedestrian walkways that are also safe. And so you can actually make up your mind to reduce energy, and some other benefits by ensuring that you don't pull your car for a short journey. For instance, if I know that the time of bus arrival in my bus station and the time it leaves are regular, and I can plan my journey to my workplace and others, I will definitely be encouraged to leave my car and join public transport. These are things government should do for its citizens. But we can also, there's things we can do even in the worst situation. If it's just 5 minutes by car, why can't you walk? Switch off the ignition when you are in traffic. These little actions, they help in reducing our carbon footprint. Instead of waiting for someone, reduce your wind down and then turn off your ignition. Is public transport an option? You'll be surprised now how comfortable and economical it is to travel on public transport. But in our country, is it possible? Could you share your car with a neighbor in exchange to take your children to school or commute them by public transport? I mentioned the Ondo State, Nigeria, but now it's not there. Maybe it's because of the money. Could you reduce the number of flights you take and other things like that? So, suggested action for companies. A study by the International Energy Agency, IEA, found that for people who commute to work via car more than 3.7 miles one way, remote working will lead to a reduction of emissions, despite the increased energy usage at home. So with more workplaces offering hybrid or remote working, that is hybrid, you come to work some days. COVID taught us this. Do you know that the amount of emissions during the COVID reduced drastically? But in some places, work were going on. The so-called lockdown or a partial lockdown. So now improving home energy efficiency, you can switch to green energy. Have you tried to work out what you spend in running generators on petrol or diesel as against the cost of installing solar inverters in a hybrid manner? with the energy from the national grid. That's what I do in my house. And I know how much I was burning fuel, when I was using generators. The generators are there, but I've been able for over a year plus now because I have an inverter system. Your diet is also implicated. The types of food you eat and where you source it from. Now, if you look at the right side, that's my house. I've decided, because I practice what I talk in this issue of climate change, mitigation, and other things like that. My house is climate smart. I have trees planted all around it. I don't have shops in front of my house to get more money. There's a place I can build shops, to get more money. These tomatoes, this one you are looking at, I just harvested it 2 days ago, right here inside the compound. So sustainable food for the kitchen, you can save the planet and help local businesses. I have started growing tomatoes and other vegetables in my compound. I can see there. Your shopping habits is another one. Another factor is how often you purchase new products, such as electronics, household, and other things like that. Let's move a little fast. You can reduce your meat and dairy consumption. And knowing that study showed that livestock and their byproducts account for at least 32,000 million tons of carbon dioxide per year, or 51% of all worldwide greenhouse emissions, which is significantly more than the combined exhaust fumes from all modes of transportation and put together. But we don't know this. So let's go a bit. Refuse single-use plastic. Single-use plastic is like you boil sachet water, you suck it and they throw it away. You are endangering the planet. Why don't you have your bottle that you can take water with every day? You're not disposing it. It's not going to constitute waste. Some countries have adopted living plastic free. If you go to Kenya, the ordinary Kenya here, you will discover that plastics and nylons are outlawed. My little girl was traveling to Poland, and normally that's something you use to wrap the box. Is cellophane. When they got to the airport, because of the country is going to, he said, no, that's not allowed. Because at the other end in Poland, you will be in trouble because they are trying to live plastic-free and nylon-free. We can do it in the country. Some of the actions you can take, one is that what I've said. Take your own reusable shopping bag to the shops. Use own food containers, cup, and utensils to avoid unnecessary throwaways of plastic. Carry a reusable water bottle. Sort your waste into biodegradable and non-biodegradable in your waste bins. You can compost your house. I'm doing that. Every waste from the kitchen, I've told my wife, there's a place, a big container where we pour it, and I mix certain things to bring the manure that I will use in planting in the house. So some of these actions we can take. Business premises, you can choose to go green by appliances, choose efficient office lighting, optimize heating and air conditioning, reduce food waste, promote paperless culture, promote waste recycling, avoid single-use coffee cups, glass, all that, and promote greener commuting. And some other steps, educate your company staff. One of the best ways business can become greener is to educate themselves about sustainable practices. We'll be having webinars on implementing the ESG, and that will be focused on that. And, instead of having, have also R&D sections to help evaluate your value chain, including your production and supply chain for energy efficiency and smart climate practices. Excuse me. It's important that you work with like-minded businesses who share your goals for reducing your carbon footprint. In making purchases, in partnering with government, companies and so on, look for those that are climate smart interested. Non-governmental organization, I'm ending here. What can we do? For NGOs and initiatives like the Okpolo Initiative, we can engage in climate education and awareness creation. It will interest you that so many people don't even understand the science of climate change. And that's why they say, no, that's nothing like climate change. You know, somebody said, well, the flood we have is a gift from God. Does God give gift that make people to die? Why have we, made the climate so much that when there's a rain, it becomes in excess and devastating? Cyclone, hurricane in other countries and so on. So adding our voice also to demanding for climate justice, like I've said earlier, as NGOs will help. Leading in the area of ensuring companies and corporate organizations implement environmental, social, and governance practices by conducting workshops and other forms of training for their staff. Then advocacy. So these are areas and many other areas in the COP meetings, in all the places where they hold it, NGOs go. Even the Ministry of Environment engage. We have gone some time to plan for, for them, and engage NGOs that will, be able to engage in the discussions. So in conclusion, every human, family, company, and all agencies of government has a carbon footprint on the environment. And no matter how hard we try to reduce it, with urbanization and constant evolution, it's not possible to completely eradicate our carbon footprint, but it can be controlled and reduced to keep the environment green for future generations by the actions you take or refuse to take. So this is where we're ending, and I want to appreciate everyone that has listened and the Okpolo group that made this webinar possible. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Prof. It's been a wonderful section, and it has really opened our eyes to things we needed to know, especially on global warming, like activities that contribute to global warming, and the evidence that there is a global warming, such as the droughts, the heat waves, and the rest. Then we've been able to learn also the mitigation, adaptation, and the finance aspect of it. Then especially the efforts of the COPs, the Conference of Parties on Climate Change, by bringing the government officials, the world leaders, ministers, and the rest together to deliberate and jointly take actions on this climate change. And the key concerns on the global community, which is majorly on the mitigation, adaptation, and the financial aspects of it. Then Prof also talked about the Africa is the most exposed region to the adverse effects of the climate change. And the way we needed to actually tackle it is by taking action and thinking globally. That is, means we must participate in demanding for climate justice, then acting locally. What can we do? Like he suggested that we can organize an advocacy, a workshop, climate mitigation and awareness. Then what can we do individual, as a corporate organization, as a NGOs, as a family? What are the activities that we venture into that actually increase that contribute to the global warming? Then he spoke about the carbon footprint too, which is the total amount of greenhouse gases produced directly or indirectly by our activities. In fact, one of them is transportation. We should rethink the way we should rethink our transportation system. The smaller your carbon footprint, the better the planet and the future. And that is where the sustainability aspects of this actually come in. And he was able to tell us that, okay, what can we do as a NGO, as private organization and the rest? They reduce carbon emission from burning fossil fuels. So many houses nowadays, we don't, because of our improper waste management system. You see, house A are burning their own refuse, house B is burning their own, and everything coupled together, even the emission generated from home, it's actually contributed a lot to this global warming, and the climate change is affecting everyone, and affecting different sectors, especially agriculture and other sectors presently. So we need to save our fuel cost and emission, fewer, reduce the greenhouse gases. That is sustainable transportation, cost saving on fuel and vehicles. In fact, if possible, we need to just reduce the way we put our vehicles on our cars on the road, rather go for a bigger buses, coastal buses that can actually transport people. And that is where the government's action will really come in. So thank you very much for putting us through how to calculate the carbon footprint using Ali and Simbi with their daily activities such as cooking, smoking, runs, generator, and so on. Thank you very much. It's really an insightful session. So we are moving straight to the aspects of question and answer. In case you have a question and answer, just signify by raising up your virtual hand on this call. If you have question and answer, questions for for Professor Okogbe, kindly signify by raising up your virtual hand. Okay, so I can see Eromo Shele Precious hand up. Please unmute and they ask a question. Hello.
Thank you very much.
Is the voice on?
I think, okay. Please go ahead with your question.
Thank you very much for some contribution. So I wanted to ask because I recently read that aerosol reduction in particularly over Asia are the causes of significant Can I go ahead?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. So I recently read that aerosol reduction in for example, a scenario was during the COVID, as earlier mentioned. The global environment had a significant reduction in a carbon footprint in the world during that period. Places like the Asia continent saw a significant kind of increase in extreme precipitation. So I wanted to ask, are there any adaptive kind of measures to be focused on this in the future?
Well, you will realize that I said earlier that even if we stop completely emitting carbon into the atmosphere, there's enough carbon resident in the atmosphere that will still cause the global warming and the climate change that we see. What we are saying is a sustained way of continuing to reduce it so that the impact will continually slow. The COVID years, during the COVID period, staff in my department also did a study, and that showed that, and some of my students really, showed that there was significant reduction in carbon loading of the atmosphere. And that's obvious because, I mean, most people, their cars were at home. Most people were not traveling and other things like that. So you will expect that. But it does not remove the fact that the atmosphere is already loaded with carbon. So that's where we will still be talking about adaptation and building resilience as we talk about mitigation and reducing our carbon footprint. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you, Prof.
Yeah,
you answered the question. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. One of my boss hand is up. Okay, Professor Idi Nkafu Akpe's hand is up.
Did you say boss? Good morning, everyone.
Yes,
can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can.
Yes, can hear
Yeah,
you.
I want to thank Professor Kogwe for the brilliant lecture. I enjoyed every bit of it. And I'm hearing things I want to hear. You mentioned climate justice, and that's the first time I'm hearing that word. I happen to be working in a university in Niger Delta, precisely in Delta State. And talking about the recent flood, some of my staff, their homes were affected. And, we've been talking about climate change all along, but it doesn't really make sense to us in Nigeria because we have other underdeveloping issues. So when you talk about climate change, people are saying, what is climate change? But when this flood episode came, climate change now became more meaningful. Yeah. When I look around me here, just 15 minutes from where my university is, we have people engaged in gas flaring. And I just begin to wonder, what can we do? Government has sold all the crude oil to international organizations and all of that. But the locals around engage in gas flaring. They increase pollution of the area, and of course, more deposition of carbon and all of that. We have listened to what we can do as individuals, planting of trees, go green, and all of that. But what further things can we do? Especially this issue of gas flaring that I just mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma. One of the issues of the Niger Delta militancy and all that is demand for climate justice. That's just the sum total of it. You exploit their environment, all the money, and then the environment is the worst for it. And because also they don't have enough, they can't farm, they can't fish, so they flare oil and all that. And of course, they don't know that they're also causing more problem for themselves, even though the government is not looking. So it is this issue of climate justice. I talk about thinking globally and acting locally. Acting locally, both ways, climate justice is involved, And for instance, in many countries where you have oil, the gas they are flaring is a huge source of money for the country if it can be harnessed. But now we're talking about the technology to get it properly harnessed. Is not a small technology. It's a very costly, and that's one of the issues of demanding for climate justice globally, telling those people that, look, apart from reducing your emission, apart from adapting, to the causes of climate change in your place, you should also help the so-called third world or the developing countries with the finance that is needed to tackle our own problem. Because you caused the problem ab initio. By the time we were not industrially active, you had already polluted the atmosphere. By the time we didn't know about any using coal and all that, you were taking the coal from us and using it to power your industries. I was in a climate change conference in the UK. Sitting by my side was somebody from Malaysia. During lunch, we were talking. He asked me, where are you from? I said, from Nigeria. Although he, first of all, cracked very dangerous joke. He said, you're from Nigeria? He said he used to be a special assistant to Kofi Annan as a United Nations Secretary General. He said, Nigeria, where you do farming on the television, you do internet on the television. He was using his fingers to count all the things we said that we are doing on the television and on the ground. Corruption is one of our problems, And so that's why you have agitations here and there. How can we be suffering in the midst of plenty? How can we be swimming in the ocean and we are thirsty, there's no water to drink? So it's part of climate justice, and both internally and externally, globally, we must continue to demand for climate justice. But in doing that, we must also think that even if we continue to contribute to this loading of the atmosphere with carbon, we are also not spared. I don't know if I have made sense, ma.
Thank you, sir. I think that's, I believe it answered her question.
Yeah, because she's in the maybe she can also help to say something.
It's okay.
Yeah, ma, if you can buttress more on the experience in that location you are, does he speak to it?
That's why I asked the question. I didn't know the answer. Yes, you answered very well. You answered very well. You answered very well. In fact, from what you said, you also talked about NGOs now coming up with educative programs to educate the people around that in fighting for climate justice, you don't need to continue to pollute your environment, but there are ways of marshalling your points such that you achieve climate justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So it all boils down to awareness for everyone to actually know, in as much as we are seeking for justice, we should not go the extra mile of destroying what we are claiming to fight for. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, ma'am. I have Michael Oyalano, hands up, virtual hand up. Please unmute and speak. Michael Oyalano. Okay. Why we wait? Okay. You can speak now, please.
Good morning, sir. Thank you so much for the great presentation, Prof. I would just like to ask, is it possible we get the slide that was used? I don't know if that would be possible.
I think Nika can answer that question.
Thank you, sir.
Nika.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll get back to the mail we'll send some, we are going to send it to the mail you registered with.
Thank you so much, Nika.
All right, thank you so much. I actually just got the Zoom link. I saw it on a WhatsApp status, but I couldn't register via the link. And I was sent the Zoom link directly. So probably I'll just speak with the person if I can also get it.
Kindly drop your mail on the chat box.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nika. Thank you. May I ask Abiodu Oguyemi to unmute and ask this question?
Thank you very much. It was great to listen to Prof. And that was a very wonderful, exciting, and engaging presentation. Thank you very much, sir. I'm from the IT background, and one of the issues that we also deal with in IT is green, to promote green computing, because we also have carbon emission generation as a result of IT activities, computing, and what have you. So I know that Nigeria, has a tendency of, growing in the area of IT. And then when we look at the number of people using information technologies, you can see there's a sort of increase there. So I wouldn't know regarding all the issues that we present today, the place for IT consideration in mitigating carbon emission, because in EU, what is going on under Industry 5.0 framework is to see European Union member states that is able to synergize green and social industrial strategy, so that under what they call Green Deal, and we can begin to deal with the issue of carbon emission and climate change. So I wanted to know, what is the place of IT regarding Nigeria's vision and mission to deal with all these issues? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abiadu. In fact, Mika will realize that I was talking last night. What do I remove? What do I keep? And so on. There's so many things to be talked about, and the little hour we have, I actually had a slide that has to do with issues that has to do with the IT as it relates to carbon emission. And you know that some, for instance, if you take the United Kingdom and probably the US, there are people who stay in India and they are working in their companies online, troubleshooting their ICT, whatever, and solving problems with them, So those countries, they will not need to have, because when you talk about the ICT, I have a small Mac here. If I have a big computer, maybe this room is full, so many computers and things like that, like we do, and so many of them are waste. If you go from one university to another, it will surprise you, even in my university, to see how much we have old desktops, old CPUs, and junks all over the place. How do we take care of them in a smart way? How do we do our computing and in a way that we minimize the hardwares? How do we go? I'm looking for the language that slide, because I deleted that slide. Has there are a number of things that we can do to ensure that even the ICT sections, excuse me, of our various organizations are climate smart. And that is what other countries are doing. But let me warn again that all of this is capital intensive. So when you're talking about EU and so here, although it's not that we don't have the capital, is that we don't spend the money where we should spend it. We give the money to those people and they use to solve their problem by way of stealing our money and things like that. Corruption is a problem. That's the bottom line, even in this. So there's a lot that can be done, Dr. Abiadu, like you said earlier, but it has to do with planning, it has to do with, priority setting and other things like that. And awareness. I will talk with you later, and we'll see how we can, improve on these slides.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. I will call on Joanne Maduka After her question, then I will take questions from the chat box, because we have some questions in the chat box. So please, Ma, unmute and ask your question.
Well, thanks very much, moderator. And Prof, thanks very much for your paper. Very useful and illuminating. Now, I'm involved in an NGO. I have an NGO, actually, where we deal with the environment. And so recently, because you mentioned awareness just now, and in fact, I believe that that's what we need most in this country, awareness and advocacy. One of our, I'm sorry to say, one of our presidential candidates recently mentioned that the question of climate change, that unless the Western country gives us money, that we may not be able to do anything about climate change, because most of us still believe that climate change belongs out there, that we are not part of it. So this is the most important statement, especially if we are going to have an election, and new rulers, even the current rulers and so on. How are we going to make them buy into climate change? All this we are saying is fine, but how many of them, because at the end of the day, when you talk of corruption, when you talk of action and so on, these are the people going to carry all this forward. How are we going to convince them? As I said, it will be mainly advocacy and creation of awareness. All the other things would follow, because when you talk of the usage of firewood, now we have an additional problem with cutting of forests. We are now saying that because of the climate change is multi-dimensional. When you are now saying that climate change and so on, but at the same time, we have banditry almost all over the country, and we are saying cut down the forest, reduce the forest around roads in this and that and that. So what exactly, Prof, do you think we can do with all this? For some of us, it's very upsetting. Thanks very much. You may not have all the answers for now, but just it's a challenge.
I think
Thank you.
It's a challenge you too, really, on advocacy.
Yeah.
For instance, we've been listening to the town hall meetings of the presidential candidates. There's a particular one of them that always talk about, taking the country from consumption to production. Either way, whether consumption or production, we must talk about how to mitigate climate change problems, and unfortunately, the pressmen or the people that interview them, only few people talk about what are you going to do on this issue of climate change, both the mitigation and the adaptation, building resilience. What are you going to do? If our former president knew that what happened will happen, and there are roles he should play as a former president to ensure that we build resilience, even in Otuoke, I'm sure he will have done it. But like was said, I think it was you also that said it, that some say that some of it are really beyond the capacity of individual countries, especially the third world countries. But the question to ask is, even when the industrialized nations, the big brothers help us, what do we do with the help? How do we utilize the funds that come to be used for these issues of climate change? That's the question. When corruption is at it's a monster that we have to deal with. So we keep on, you people that are in NGOs, keep on with advocacy, keep on with awareness, address people, the Kimbaloyers of this world, the Rufais of this world. When they are interviewing these people, they should also ask them about what they're going to do about climate change. Yeah, I was mentioning that the former president of the United States was cracking jokes and with it until the worst kinds of hurricanes began to beat even his country home, Florida, and other things like that. So it's awareness. We continue to talk and then create awareness and then do advocacy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. I will take a question from the chat box from Victoria Luke. The question is, in your opinion, Prof, has mining activities of solid materials influenced climate change in Nigeria? What is Nigeria not doing right to curb climate change?
Yeah, mining activities, it's not even organized. You can't even know. The people that the young man that let me use the young man that is mining illegally in Osun State, how does he know what is happening? How do we even know what's the carbon footprint of his actions there? The one that is doing it in Zamfara State, that is not organized. You can only talk about the impact of the. You see, let me tell you, I intended to say, like, we blame the big countries, the industrialized nations. They can have a tap on their emission status, but we don't have, because there are so many things happening back here. Professor was those who are doing gas flaring in Niger Delta. Do we have a tap of all of them? And do we have can we quantify what effects they are bringing? Because those things are done. Okay, you have heard that for 9 years plus now, they have been stealing our crude. They have been taking it. Some are refined in hidden places. In their modular refineries or whatever they call it. Government tried to even, instead of criminalizing these people, to actually bring them in, use them to build modular refineries. Have we heard anything about it anymore? If they were, how did the people, some of these computer giants, how did they arrive into the scene? Some were captured as thieves. Many years ago, in my footer here, we had a small blue roof where we have internet cyber cafe. A pre-degree student who is not yet a student was caught. He will come there, buy a ticket of 100 naira. He will stay there from morning till evening. He will enter the thing and configure it and then begin to browse free. When we get people like that, instead of criminalizing them, can we take them somewhere and see how we can tap their energy and even pay them? They will do that. They will become our watchdog and other things like that. That will reduce crime. And like modular refineries that our vice president, who is the chair of the economic council or whatever, talked about. Do we have the modular refineries now? The only way to get a tap on the carbon footprint that of the activities that happen illegally is to legalize them and then find a way to be in control and be in charge. I don't know
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I hope Victoria is still in the call. I hope the answer is okay for your question. Okay. May I call on Yusuf Abdullakim? Please unmute and ask your question.
Okay. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
I am from agricultural sector. I am still an undergraduate student of agricultural economics. I want to buttress the point of the last contributor. I stay in kind of a community whereby once it comes to December, most people, the area boys that are around, they used to go from one house to another to steal people's property. And the community has laid down a kind of, or maybe they have a kind of a way to curb it by setting tires on fire. So through that, I think that could affect and the carbon emission of the community in that area. So, and to meet with the community leader to tell them the effects and the negativity of this is a great thing. So, and if I say this, but through this fire, I think what they are trying to say to get from there is that so that it's going to set ourselves as light and to chase away all these the thieves. And this is causing a great setback for carbon emission. Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. I think I agree with you. It's and again, advocacy, education, awareness raising, and then also solving the problem of poverty that make people go into all that kind of things.
There's a question in the chat box from Olanike. Okay. Please, how do we get our government to do more in terms of climate change financing in face of economic challenges? And what options are available for the developing countries in terms of climate change financing?
Yeah, I mentioned that, there are three key issues that are discussed in climate change, discussed globally. The issue of mitigation, the issue of adaptation, and financing. And I mentioned in financing that there's a legal obligation on industrialized nations, excuse me, on industrialized nations, not only to, spend to do their own mitigation in their countries, but to help the third world countries, the developing countries, with the finance, with the technology transfer, and the technologies that we need to actually tackle the issue of climate change. And this is where the issue is. But there's going to be another webinar on each of these. The major issue today is to discuss the problem of carbon loading of the atmosphere and what we can do in terms of the mitigation. So there's also going to be a webinar on adaptation, how to build resilience in the various sectors, how to be climate smart in the various sectors. And there's going to be another on financing, how to tap into the global financing, as NGOs, as corporate organizations and things like that. People are doing it, carbon trading, carbon this, carbon that. So we can, people are also buying into it in this country. So we can educate ourselves on how to do it. But as far as government is concerned, if it were an advanced clients, somebody came and said, oh, sorry, it's not the water that came from Cameroon that is causing problem. It is the gift of God. In other places, that day, that man will resign because he has shown no capacity, no intelligence. But what can we do in the country? I was invited to a radio program some years back here in those states on the issue of flooding. I was even in Dotam then. A flash flood came and took over the road, in a split of a second. And so many things were damaged. Now, what the government was supposed to have done before, excuse me, please. What the government was supposed to have done before then, widen the drainages, especially around the Lake Bakala Road, to those who know in Dotam. They didn't do it. But when that thing happened, they started doing it. And then they cut off the road that people coming from Lagos and things like that would pass. All trailers entered into the major cities, in the major city, and spoiled all the roads. Then they brought me to to the Minister of Environment and one other ministry and the radio program. And I said, sorry, we do a fire brigade approach in solving problems. We don't envisage that a problem is going to come and do some things to, to prepare ourselves for it until when the problem is on ground. Then we begin to do our fire brigade approach, and we spend more than we should have spent if we are proactive. So proactiveness on the side of government, proactiveness on the side of citizens. Why must you build on the floodplain, for instance? Why must you buy a land where the water will chase you away very soon? And so those are the things that everybody has a role to play. Government, individuals, agencies of government, town planning authorities, and other things like that. And those who get approvals for structures in places, all have a role to play. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Olanike, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. And once again, thank you for everyone that has participated in this webinar. I'm sure we have gained a lot today. And since there are no questions again, and we need to move on with the other daily activities, I would like to run us through what we do in Opolo. Opolo actually means brain, and that is innovation comes from the brain. So Opolo is an innovation enabler. We are incubator, we are accelerator, grooming talent to become an entrepreneur. And part of what we do is a research commercialization. We have co-working space, we organize mentorship and coaching, and talent as a service, of management as a service, and so on. And presently, we are having our hubs in Obafemi Awolowo University. We have one in Osun State University. We have in Tams, Ife-Tedo, and we have in Otaye Baju. Then with our head office located in Lagos, Ikoyi, Lagos. So that is about Opolo. Then regards this, the continuation of this webinar, the one we had today is just an introductory aspect to the series of the webinar we are going to be holding on this climate change. So we are going to be coming up with other ones like building resilience in various sectors where climate change is a problem or a challenge. For instance, on the agricultural sector, we'll be looking into smart agricultural practices. Then on how we can, we are going to organize a workshop and training on ESG implementation for governments, for corporate organizations, for private, and for companies. So how we can implement ESG. Then perhaps you want your organization to be part of this initiative, or you want a group of organizations to actually benefit from this initiative, you can actually reach out to us. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Michael, hello.
All right, thank you very much. I don't know if you can hear me.
Okay.
Yes, once again, I would like to appreciate everyone for joining this section. Of course, just like what you've said earlier, it's been an insightful one. And I also want to thank Prof for taking our time to be on this call and other attendees of this Research to Enterprise webinar series. Just like my colleague had said earlier, this is not the end. Of course, we will having more programs that focuses on climate change and how we can actually be part of the persons or individuals fighting these challenges that we face. So you can get more about information and what we do. You can also take out time to follow us on our social media platforms, on our Instagram, on of course, if you want to get to receive our newsletter, for those that have registered, yes, you'll be receiving our monthly newsletters where you can always subscribe for it. Our LinkedIn, you can always do well to follow just so you can get updates on all the initiatives that we offer at Opolo, and just what my colleague had earlier mentioned. So once again, thank you everyone, and we look forward to see you participate in our forthcoming programs. So thank you, Nika, and thank you everyone.
Thank you, Professor Ibinka Fuakwe. We really appreciate your presence and waiting even to the end. Abiodun Ogunyemi, you're highly appreciated. And every other people on this call. Professor Okogbe, thank you very much for the time you have really given unto us eyes to understanding about climate change. Thank you very much. Everyone, thank you so much. Hope to see you in the next edition of our webinar, especially on this climate change. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you for coming. I'm really encouraged by your presence.